You ever get that feeling that the world is just teetering on the edge of something huge? Well, today we're going to dig into a really powerful way of thinking about that feeling, all drawn from Victor Shevitz's book, The Twilight Before the Storm. We're going to use his ideas to try and make sense of the, let's face it, pretty chaotic world we're all living in.
I mean, seriously, does it feel like we're just bouncing from one crisis to the next? There's this feeling of uncertainty that just hangs in the air, a sense that the systems we all kind of took for granted are starting to fray at the edges. So yeah, it's a question on a lot of people's minds. Why does everything feel so shaky?
Well, according to Shevitz, that feeling you have, it is absolutely not an accident. He makes the case that we are smack in the middle of a really dangerous transition period, one that has these unsettling echoes of the fractured, volatile 1930s. So yeah, let's unpack exactly what that means. So where is all this instability coming from? The core argument of the book is that we're living through the collapse of a single massive economic idea, an ideology that has basically run the show for the last 40 years. And Shevitz, he doesn't mince words. He just comes right out and says it. Neoliberalism has become a failed ideology. He points to the 2008 global financial crisis as the moment it all shattered, the moment public faith in this whole free market approach just evaporated, creating the political and social chaos we're dealing with today. Okay, so what exactly is neoliberalism? The easiest way to think about it is like a modern comeback for 19th century ideas about free market capitalism. It's a philosophy that really puts the private sector on a pedestal and tries to shrink the government's role in, well, pretty much everything. And in the real world, what does that look like? Well, you're talking about policies like privatizing public services, getting rid of regulations on industries, and pushing for globalization and free trade at all costs. It often goes hand in hand with austerity, big cuts to government spending. It's the kind of thinking you'd associate with figures like Ronald Reagan and Margaret Thatcher. Now, to really get a handle on the turmoil today, Shevitz says we've got to look back in time. And he draws this really powerful and frankly pretty unsettling parallel to what was happening in the 1930s. And when you put the two eras side by side, the similarities are kind of spooky, right? In the 1930s, free market liberalism was totally discredited, but there was nothing to replace it. Today, it's neoliberalism. Back then, you had a disruptive new technology, the radio shaking things up. Today, it's AI and social media. And in both cases, the result was exactly the same, a deep, corrosive loss of faith in our institutions. But hold on, this isn't just a simple repeat of history. Shevitz argues there's something totally unique and incredibly powerful happening today, a modern game changer that he calls the Fujiwara effect. So what on earth is the Fujiwara effect? Okay, picture two giant hurricanes colliding and merging into one superstorm. That's kind of what this is. It's the collision of two massive forces. You've got advanced technology on one side, and on the other, deep financialization, which is just a fancy way of saying financial markets have way more power and influence than ever before. When they smash together, they create this really weird world, one with amazing abundance and innovation, but also constant chaos and this downward pressure on prices and wages. So here's the breakdown of how it works. That advanced tech and deep finance merge into one, and that interaction just fundamentally rewrites the rules for everything. It reshapes global markets, the kind of jobs we do, even how wealth gets made and who gets it. Shevitz says this is one of the main things driving the turmoil we feel right now. Which, of course, brings us to the million-dollar question. Where do we possibly go from here? Well, according to the book, we're standing at a major fork in the road, with two very, very different paths in front of us. The first path is, well, it's pretty grim. Shevitz warns that if we don't figure out a way to build a new consensus, to find some common ground in this ideological vacuum, we could be looking at a world on fire. And he's not being metaphorical. He's talking about the very real possibility of escalating wars between nations and intense conflict at home. But there is an alternative. As private markets kind of stumble, Shevitz predicts that governments are going to be forced to step in. In this future, the state becomes more of a guardrail for society, playing a much bigger role in shaping things and tackling huge problems like inequality. It's a complete rejection of that hands-off neoliberal way of thinking. And what's really fascinating is that this choice seems to be drawn right along generational lines. The book draws a stark contrast between the no-holds-barred capitalism of the 1990s, which was largely driven by baby boomers, and a potential future that looks a lot more like the 1950s and 60s. A more constrained system with the state heavily involved. And that might just be a model preferred by millennials and Gen Z who grew up in a totally different world. And so that's where we're left, with this final, massive question. We are in this twilight moment, watching a whole worldview that dominated for decades just fade away. The great unknown, the great uncertainty, is what the next generation, facing all of these incredible challenges, is going to choose to build in its place.